Welcome everybody. We are back with Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo Chapter 4. This is a very good chapter. We get some more lore and intrigue into the Sumerians' backstory, along with the setup of a potential battle with a curse user. So I will just start off by saying I know that there are leaks for Modulo that come out every single week. I do not read any of those. I do not cover any of those. I'm only going to go off of the official that is released every Sunday by Shonen Jump. So I just wanted to let everybody know that that's the schedule I will be following. So I realize that by the time this is posted, there may even already be leaks for Chapter 5. So please, if there are, try not to, no spoilers or anything like that. But without further ado, we're going to jump right into Chapter 4, The Boy Who Kept Repeating. And the chapter opens up with Usami saying that Maru is an alien. And we get this hilarious panel of Tsurugi and Yuka just simultaneously saying, we know. For them, the cat has already been out of the bag, but the official overseer of the diplomatic relations, Usami, was not obviously keen to the information of what occurred in Chapter 1. And basically, Usami goes on to say that they weren't even supposed to tell the two of them that Maru was an alien, but the special envoy from the Sumerians, actually are the ones that reported it because Maru is the one who let it slip in the first place that he's an alien. And obviously they're referring to when he reveals his third eye and uses his presumably Jujutsu. Don't know what it's still don't know what it's called for the Sumerians, but I'm just going to say Jujutsu, and knocks out that curse user. So Usami continues that Tsurugi and Yuka's task is to continue to carry out Jujutsu missions with Maru. So nothing has really changed with the situation. There's just some more transparency between the two parties involved. And Maru is all ecstatic, like he can't wait to go on these missions with them. And both Yuka and Tsurugi just basically no reaction, ignore it, and they're just like, yeah, whatever. And Maru's like, why can't you guys just sound a little bit happier? So I love, it's very similar. It gives me a little bit of reminiscent vibes. Maru reminds me of like Yuji and his, childlike, just pure heart and excitement to be around other people and do things together. And Tsurugi and Yuka are much more aligned with Megami and Nobara in that they just don't give Maru the time of the day, just like those two didn't for Itadori. So I love seeing a nice trio dynamic, but this is when Usami takes the opportunity to kind of like on the side tell Tsurugi that he believes that the Sumerians' goal with this envoy to observe Jujutsu sorcerers is predominantly there for recon so that they can gather intel. Because he says that even though they understand their language, it is not easy to collect information about Jujutsu, because even though it is now public knowledge amongst the world that Jujutsu and paranormal stuff actually exists, it still is a smaller subset of humanity that are sorcerers, and curse spirits we know now also basically only show up in Tokyo. So it is going to be much harder for them to collect information of their own accord. So Maru is going to be their direct link to Jujutsu Society and getting that information. So, and Usami states that because of his position, he can't necessarily go around digging into the Sumerians and trying to get information on them. So he wants Tsurugi to find out every detail he can about them from Maru, no matter how small. And Tsurugi even thinks back to what happened in last chapter and when he asked Maru if he should even be telling him his information around his abilities and his connection to his brother and how they share the same powers. And he is just thinking back on it, but he's like, I got it. Sure, that sounds good. And they just have to go along with it. Both Usami and Mino are frustrated because this whole situation is being filtered through two teenagers. So the frustration is real, but it's the situation that they're put in right now, and there's nothing that they can really do about it. But from here, the chapter transitions to a classroom, and we have a teacher with a very creepy little kid in the background. But first, we get to see 3 identical panels of the same child, but he's wearing different outfits, and there's different classmates in the background. But he is being called by different names in every panel. So it's just very creepy, and basically they got a report that they've heard that there's a student at this elementary school who keeps repeating the 3rd grade, and that it's the 3rd year that it's happened. And it's Mino, and he's telling our trio that their mission is to investigate whether there's any Jujutsu-related phenomenon at work in this situation. So they basically run through all of the options of what they think it could be when it comes to, is it just some kids who look alike? But Mino's like, hey, their voices and heights match too. If their builds are similar, their voices are probably similar too. And they're just running through a bunch of stuff. But this is actually where we get a little bit of information on Maru and the Sumerians, because Yuka makes the statement that kids' heights are all over the place, because it's true. They all grow vastly different. Some people have late growth spurts, some people early, depends on boys, girls, like all the heights amongst children just vary all over the place. And she asks him if it's the same for the aliens. And Maru responds with something here that is a very small line and most people might brush over, but he says it depends on the type. And he says that we Sumerians are a lot like you and Tsurugi. And I think it's interesting that he says depends on the type. And that leads me to think, like I talked about when we first were revealed to the captain or the leader of the Sumerians, he has a 3rd eye as well, but his is vertical, not horizontal. It's more of like that. It's a different shape. He has horns. Maru, Cross don't have horns. So there's clearly some differences even amongst the Sumerians, just like there are differences amongst human beings on the planet. So it piques my interest. I just want more and more information on the Sumerians, and it seems like it's going to be a slow drip feed of information dragged out over time. But I'm here for it, and this is where they actually ask, Maru, they're like, by the way, how old are you? And he thinks about it, and he's like, well, in Earth terms, I'm 19. And it's just this funny moment where both Yuka and Tsurugi thinks to himself, I'm going to pretend that I didn't hear that. And Yuka's like, there's no way I'm going to treat him like he's older now. And this is just one of those cultural things, especially when it comes to Japan specifically. They are very, very big on respecting anybody who's older than you. So it's not just elderly, it's not just the adults, but it's even other teenagers who are older than you. But they're just basically saying nope, we've seen basically how he is in his personality, and they're like, I am not treating him as if he is older than me, and I'm not going to show him that respect, which is just hilarious because Maru doesn't know those cultural things about them because he's not from this planet and he's not from this country. So he's none the wiser that they're just going to continue on treating him the way that they have been up until this point. So they kind of continue working through their theories and questions around this case. About the big questions is like, one, are his parents, and then two, his progress at school, which there have been times where the teachers have tried to reach out to his parents and they get just like this creepy voice like that says, yeah, Masaki is my son. And they try to continue talking to him and it just repeats that, yes, Masaki is my son. And then it's like, hello. And it's just like going through this crazy speech. It just doesn't make any sense. And the teacher just looks freaked out and panicked. And so clearly there's something, at play here. And as for the second, the past 2 years, the students with the same face transferred out and disappeared with their family just as they moved up to the second grade. And every year, the student's face and address are exactly the same, but they have a different name each time. And they're like, okay, well, that settles it, because he is saying that he thinks that some curse user takes the place of some random kid who enrolls in that school, and they might be getting rid of the families too. So it seems like it's likely that they're picking their targets by using a rental property to basically draw families in with the children, and then the curse user replaces himself with the child and gets rid of the parents and the family. But they haven't been able to track down the landlord yet to that property. And Mino just continues to say that the scariest part of this whole situation is the carelessness of it, because the curse user, there's no rational thought. They're being much too obvious. They are not, there's a whole situation here that doesn't make much sense if this curse user is trying to remain under the radar, or at least if it is a curse user, then that means they're just acting irrationally, and that could lead to going head to head with the curse user, because clearly they are not a rational, logical, even probably sane individual. So most likely it will result in combat. So basically they decide to split up. So Yuka goes with Mino. They're going to go to the address and go check out the house. And then Maru and Tsurugi are going to go to the school to try to find the child. And so sure enough, the kid comes walking out of school, and Tsurugi comes up on him looking all mean and intimidating and scary, and is like, "You're Masaki Takeda, right?" And the kid just is freaked out, sprints away, and Tsurugi's like, "Oh, you're gonna run away from me?" But Maru's like, "Yeah, any kid would run away from you in the way you've just presented yourself." And I fully agree with Maru here. You intimidated the kid, and of course he's gonna run away because he's scared. But they catch up to him, they catch up to the kid, but before they could do anything, we have this shadowy figure appear around the child, around Masaki, and it's got threads coming off of it, and basically both Maru and Tsurugi both kind of block attacks from this entity that has appeared. And then we get a more detailed look of it, and it has like a spool of yarn or some sort of string, and it's got pins coming out of its head. It's actually a very, very cool design. And this is where Tsurugi, first I got to comment on the fact that Maru, he came in with the hand-to-hand combat. He's got his like because he was described by Cross being a warrior, that Maru is a warrior. He is goofy, he's super kind-hearted, but at the end of the day, he is actually a Sumerian warrior. So it is very cool to get to see him kind of break out of that goofy mold. It's like when Yuji would lock in. He goes from this goofy, kind-hearted, innocent kid that's a sweetheart to just being a absolute monster when he locks in and just disregards all of that, and he's ready to throw down. So it's cool to get to see Maru kind of exhibiting a similar type of switch. But this is where Tsurugi states, like, is a Shikigami? He's wondering if it's a Shikigami, or is it a guardian spirit? And this part I love because Maru says a Kallion. So he calls this a Kallion. So either a Shikigami or a guardian spirit for the Sumerians and their power system and wherever they're from, this would be called apparently a Kallion. So it's very cool that we get to get a name for something within their power system and their version of Jujutsu. And Tsurugi tells him to stand back, and he thinks to himself that by the looks of things and how Usami is handling this whole diplomatic relations with the aliens, he is able to deduce that the aliens are the ones calling the shots. They are the ones they have the upper hand right now. They are the ones that are basically using Maru as a litmus test to gauge human nature. Because again, they're seeking whether they are going to coexist or are they going to be in conflict with humans. And Tsurugi believes that Maru is worried about whether to use his technique or not because of his connection with Cross. Because as soon as he uses it, Cross is going to know, and the thought process would be, why is Maru required to use his powers when there are Jujutsu sorcerers with him? So Tsurugi surmises that there's no way he can let Maru fight, and he can't let him get hurt either. So right now, his hidden objective is to get through these missions without any incident at all, and handling it between himself and Yuka, and kind of just having Maru truly be a bystander that does not participate. So that way that they can avoid war with the aliens. And before they're just about to get into combat, and the child, Masaki, starts apologizing and saying, "I'm sorry." And that's where we cut to them sitting on a swing set, and he begins to give the backstory of what happened. And he says that 3 years ago, he went home and found his mom on the floor. Presumably, she had passed. And he didn't want to be in a different class in second grade, so he begged his mom to let him stay in first grade forever. And he says that his mom became a ghost, and she made it so that he could be in first grade forever. And this is where Tsurugi joins in to say that, because he's thinking on Mino's statement about how this curse user, if it is a curse user, there is just complete carelessness in the way they are operating, and they would be found out. But he says that it makes sense because if it's a kid's jujutsu that's just going crazy after his mom dies, then that explains the carelessness. And he actually brings up a great point that a similar thing happened to awaken his grandpa's jujutsu. So it's possible given the circumstances. And of course, he's referring to what happens in Jujutsu Kaisen 0 when Rika Orimoto unfortunately passes away in front of Yuta's eyes. He loves her so much that he does not want to separate from her. And that's when his jujutsu activates and he actually curses her to remain with him. And that's where we get the vengeful curse spirit, Rika. And so it is a very, very similar situation. And he just goes on to ask that it could be, he just asks him like what his true name is, the child's true name, and he says that his real name is Masayoshi, and he asks him if he can take both of them to his house because there's something that he wants to check. But then we actually get to see Yuka and Mino arrive at the house, and they are at Masaki Takeda's house, and Yuka immediately says, "I've got a bad feeling about this." And they're walking on the pathway up to the house, and there are bushes and some gardens to both sides, and Yuka senses something, and she says, "Mino, I'm sure my brother and Maru will be here soon, so let's dig up that spot first." There's something that she senses. And we get a surprise panel of both Tsurugi and Yuka, and we actually go to the next page and see a skull that is intertwined with the roots of one of the vegetation that is in this garden. And Yuka says it's just what she thought. And we also get to see Tsurugi has a shovel and he's dug up a grave, and he says, "I guess like this is your mother's body. Of course you had no choice but to hide it here. Like you're a child, there's no way you could make it far with an adult body regardless." And Maru is just using this opportunity to empathize with Masayoshi and say how tough it must have been. He had to bury his mother himself, and how good of a job he did. And Masayoshi asks if he's going to be arrested, but Maru's like, "No, of course not." But Tsurugi is basically like, well, if he doesn't have a dad, Jujutsu High will probably take him in and train him to handle cursed energy. Basically, you can't live probably as a normal individual of society anymore because of your abilities, but you can come to Jujutsu High and be taught how to utilize your powers for the greater good. And Masayoshi wonders like where he would, go home to. And Maru's like, "Well, you just go to Jujutsu High." And Masayoshi thinks like, "Well, what about my house? Like I can't come back here." And Maru's like, "You're right. Like I know this is difficult to take in." And this is where we actually get some more lore and information on what actually transpired to the Sumerians to result in them becoming refugees. Because he's like, actually, I don't have a place to call home either. All the familiar places that were around me and my home that was filled with all of the memories that I had, he says that he lost all of it. And he doesn't think that he can ever fill the hole that was left by that. At least not until he becomes neighbors, that is. With someone, he becomes neighbors with someone. And I just want to pause right here to say that I've talked about it in some of the previous chapters, but one of the things that I'm interested the most on is what occurred to result in the Sumerians becoming refugees. Because I was wondering initially, is that just a cover-up story and they are actually just like a space-faring civilization that looks for places to conquer? But it does really seem Maru is not one to lie in this situation, and he hasn't until this point. And it really seems like something occurred on their home planet. So I'm thinking natural disaster. Did they deplete all the resources? Was there a different enemy force that drove them off the planet? These are the things that I deeply am interested in, and I would love to know. So let me know down below, like what kind of thoughts you have regarding the Sumerians' past and what has got them to this point. You can give me all the crazy theories you want. I am here for them, and I would love to read them and, just see where your guys' train of thought is going on this matter. And the Masayoshi asks like what a neighbor is, And Maru says, a friend who understands why the things that matter to you are so important. And this is just bringing home and coming circular on that whole idea of harmony that clearly Modulo is focusing on. And Maru goes on to ask Masayoshi if he will be his first neighbor and that he'll do his best to be his neighbor too. And Tsurugi is just looking on, you know, smiling at the situation. But in this wholesome moment, he gets a call from Yuka saying, like, where the heck are they and what are they doing? And Tsurugi's like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm at Masaki Takeda's house. And Yuka's like, huh, what? Like, I'm at Masaki Takeda's house. And he's like, what? And she immediately is like, Takeda is guilty, totally guilty. And then we get revealed that they have found, Mino and Yuka have found 5 bodies buried in his yard, and that she has a feeling that there will be more on top of it. And if you make contact with Takeda, take him into custody immediately. And Tsurugi immediately turns around, and Maru is seemingly knocked out unconscious on the ground. And this child, Masayoshi Takeda, is like, damn, didn't know there would be more of you. And it shows what seems to be a much more elderly person underneath this fake mask or skin that was giving the childlike appearance. And it's clearly a older cursed user. And that is where the chapter ends. So great cliffhanger for the end. I loved the lore and information we got a little bit expounded on from Maru about the Sumerians. And I am actually extremely hyped for the next chapter to see how our first battle one-on-one for Tsurugi with a curse user actually plays out. So that is where I'm going to end it. I hope you guys all enjoyed the video and enjoyed the chapter, and I am looking forward to the next one. So I hope you have a great day or night wherever you are, and I'll catch you in the next chapter. Peace.